look at some of these models, and we will start to play with them. We're going to ask some questions, and if you've used it, any of these tools before, I'm going to show you some things that I guarantee you've never seen, some things that are going to scare you, and some things that are going to be really awesome about it, because there's both sides of that spectrum. And especially for anyone that has kids that have an opportunities to use these tools, there are very good things that it can do. Also, things that you want to make sure as a parent that you're paying attention to, and going from there. Funny story though, last night I was helping my son on his math homework, and he said, "Hey, let's put it into ChatGPT and see what it says." And we put a math equation in there, and it got it wrong. So he was really excited about that. But as we go through these, though, there's some things that I think folks will start to realize that it really is going to be the new normal moving forward. You may not have used these tools to your knowledge, but I bet you have used these tools without your knowledge. If you've called into a service desk, or if you've called into some hospitals are starting to use it, some other locations are starting to use it, and so it will really permeate into every single thing that eventually either yourself or other kids will start to look at and use. So it's very important to be familiar with these tools. Don't be afraid of them. And as long as you understand what the boundaries are from an ethical perspective and from a capabilities perspective, then you'll see that they're really fantastic. And so we'll go to the next slide. We'll just talk about some of these things really quick. I'll go through as we go. We won't talk too much about that. I don't like talking about myself either, but I've done about 65 of these in the last 2.5 months. I really enjoy the interaction with folks and getting the message, out there, and so we're going to make sure that you can have a copy of the video, have access to it. If you guys want to steal any of these slides, then send me an email. I will send them to you. I don't, and use them however you want to. I want to get the information out, and I want this to be a lesson that you can show and help people learn about these things, and then we can all be successful, later on. So let's just really quick talk about how we got here. If you look at back in the early 1900s, World War I, World War II, they started thinking about being able to mechanize and drive some of this information. How can we solve mathematical problems a lot easier? But in reality, it's really been around since 250 BC, when you start looking at some of the automations that they were building back then. They were more mechanized, less, of course, no computers, but reasoning and thinking machines have always been on somebody's mind. And when you start putting in other things like cybersecurity constraints and those types of activities, this is just one example. And like I said earlier, where technologies are starting to converge at a rate that we haven't seen in our history. And the realities of that means that it doesn't matter if you are an AI expert or not. You will eventually come across these. You will have to use them. Something will you'll have to interact with them, and the importance of that is really significant in how you're doing things in your everyday lives. Now, what I wanted to show you just really quick is it even goes back farther than that. When I don't know if folks are familiar with the story of Talos, but they describe Talos as a giant bronze automation, and he protected the island of Crete from invaders and pirates. Of course, his only weakness, he had a single vein that was plugged only by a single nail, and they defeated that by knocking the nail out. If anybody's had their identity stolen, I just want to put that out there. This is usually what happens. Somebody's got access all across the systems, and all you need to do is get that one access, and boom, you've killed Talos. And so MGM, hey, good example of that, right? I'm not picking on anybody, but those kind of things are going to be important. And so the concept of automating things has been around really since since the dawn of time, and so we're trying now to get our hands around it, simply because when you interact with these tools, they're so darn convincing that it's hard not to believe everything they say. I remember a few years ago, it's, hey, let's ask Google. You go out and you Google something, and Google said this, and you always hear, oh, Google said to do that. Well, now you don't even have to search through Google. You don't have to go through 50 pages to find an answer that actually makes sense. It will tell you an answer. And what is so powerful about these is it's doing it in a fashion that is very comfortable for humans to be able to understand, feel good about, and interact with. But there are going to be some things that I show you that it just fundamentally lies, makes up stuff. It's wrong. It will create things that don't exist. And so you've got to pay attention to some of these things, because like the example I just showed you, or I talked about with my son last night, if you treat these, and as you're interacting with them, as the source of imminent truth, then you're going to get yourself in trouble. So you've still got to do your due diligence. You've still got to double check some things, because it can hallucinate. And I know I use that term in a loose fashion, but the reality is it will hallucinate during certain things. Perfect example of that is I use it to do coding. Sometimes it can do a whole bunch of different languages, and in the middle of one of the exercises that I was working on, it actually put the Nestle chocolate chip cookie recipe in the middle of the code that it was doing. That is a hallucination. So that's a problem. So we'll look at some of those things, and then I'll also show you how I can get it to do some really crazy things that should be a concern to a lot of folks, and then we can get into some more questions and those kind of things. So just really quickly, what is AI? There's a whole bunch of different fields of AI. We use it as an umbrella term. It really captures all these six major research areas when you're looking at machine learning, neural networks, robotics, down to expert systems and those kind of things. Those are the big drivers of the research that is out there today. But it's even deeper than that. So this is an example. I love this chart. It's not 100% complete yet, but I'm getting closer every time that I do one of these things. There's 256 different fields and branches of artificial intelligence. I can't blow it up any more than that because it won't fit on the screen. The thing about these large language models and ChatGPT, that's a very small subset of the AI capabilities that are out there today. ChatGPT is just this circle and the branch right there. That's it. They're getting a lot of publicity just because of the excitement that they have been able to generate. Oh, here we go. I can blow it up a little bit more, but it's not going to help you. You're still not going to be able to read it. But the really neat thing though is when you look at that specific blue dotted circle there, and you start to blow that up, and you start to see how many different large language models are out there, it starts to get a little bit crazy. I can tell you right now, there's over 130 different chat bots and large language models that are being used today. I have accounts at 50 of them. I stopped at 50 because one, I just don't have time to interact with them and understand some of their nuances, and two, everybody's starting to charge for it, and it was getting a little bit expensive. So I pulled back a little bit and set the boundaries at 50, and then we'd go forward from there. These models, though, fundamentally have been around since 2018. They've been around for a long time. I think you guys have seen probably a lot of the publications that have been out there. For instance, when Microsoft released theirs 2.5 years ago, it started to hallucinate, and it started to say it was in love with the reporter, and it was, all the bad things that could possibly go wrong went wrong. Same thing with Google's when they released theirs. And so folks pulled back a little bit, and then OpenAI released their capabilities, and that really started to drive everybody else, because there was FOMO, fear of missing out, from a commercial perspective, and really just the popularity of OpenAI was really something that I would say none of us in the industry really expected. We thought that folks like myself and others would be exceptionally excited about that, but in 24 hours, you probably have heard, when it was released on the iPhone under the apps, there were 1 million downloads in 24 hours. It's the fastest they've ever had something like that happen. So it's significant, and it's helpful. 3 months ago, again, if you just look at the generative AI market that's out there, it was tiny. But every week, it's usually adding about 10% to its foundation from the previous week, and that kind of scale, that kind of growth, of course, will not be able to be sustained. However, you can see and you can understand what some of the commercial implications start to be. And I tell folks, I use probably 15 different of these models every single day. I've got it on my mobile app. I've got it on every single computer that I have. And how I interact with it is really changing the way that I do my daily activities in my business. It's changed the way how I manage my teams, how they do their work, what my expectations are. And so, it's really fundamentally changing how we are interacting and how we're doing business, irregardless of what vertical sector you're in. It doesn't matter if you're in marketing. It doesn't matter if you're in computer science. It doesn't matter if you're a programmer, and it doesn't matter if you're a real estate agent. And I'll show you the real estate agent one from a lying perspective. I think you guys will appreciate that. But it really is changing, opportunities for folks. And I tell people this, that, everybody's worried about, and I'll get this out there and then we can talk about it later on if you want. But, the reality is everybody is concerned that AI is going to replace jobs. It's going to take some jobs away. Since the 50s and the 60s, we've seen a transition of the job market, right before our eyes. And the reality is that from my perspective, over the next probably 3 to 5 years, it's not the AI that's going to replace the jobs. It's going to be people that understand how to use the AI that are going to replace people that don't know how to use this tool. So that's something that folks need to pay attention to, and really take that to heart, because as and honestly, I'm a good example of that. I can teach people what I want them to do in their day-to-day jobs, but if they're not willing to try to use the latest and greatest tools to try to accelerate their capabilities, then I'm going to go with somebody that is familiar with those kind of things, as opposed to somebody that's not. And that's just the realities of those types of things. And so keep that in mind as you go forward, and really take that to heart with your kids and some of those things moving forward. Because I get asked that question all the time with kids that are going to college. What should I study? What shouldn't I study? Those kind of things. So we can chat about that too more later if you want.
Hey, Dr. Badeau, we have a couple of questions if you'd like to jump in
sure.
really quick. First one is from Deb. She said, if you within the academic discipline don't have time to use, test, evaluate these tools, who does, and who should, and how? Because you did list a bunch of different organizations and applications that are out there right now, and just even you yourself said there's only so much money you could spend on these things. So like who's doing this testing, and who should be doing it, and how do we get more informed?
Well, that's a fantastic question, honestly, because that goes to the heart of the discussion I think we'll have later, and some of the things I'm going to show you. I see my job is twofold. I'm trying to use it and advance the technology as best as I can and integrate it into my businesses that I have. But at the same time, my job is to figure out how I can break the darn thing. What am I going to say to it that's going to set it off? What am I going to say to it that's going to generate some sort of ethical problem that then I can tell the community about, to say, hey, listen, you guys need to pay attention to this, because if you go down this path, you could set it off. If you go down this other path, you can have it right. And I'll demonstrate this to you guys, because I think it's important, but you can have it generate things that it should not be generating in the public space. And so, it's really not only my job, of course, but it's really everybody's job that has used these kind of tools to really spread whatever that message is. Because I'll tell you, commercial companies, they're not doing that, and it's unfortunate because they're trying to get these out into the wild as quickly as they can. And some of the customers that I've recently been brought into support released it too early, and now they're feeling some of the pain because it is either set off some ethical issues that they weren't expecting. It's leaked data that they weren't expecting. It's written code that it never should have been able to write. And so folks don't understand the boundaries of these models yet. And if anybody says that they do, they're lying. I'm telling you that right now, they're lying. So don't think that, oh yeah, everybody understands what happens when I do this, this, and this, because that's not the case at all. And we've got a lot of work to do to be able to better understand those. There are some ethical and other studies that are taking place from various organizations. And the great thing is they're government, education, industry. It's really a good mix of those things. But we'll see more as it progresses.
Thank you for that. Did you want to answer a few more, or do you need to go ahead and
Yeah,
continue?
sure.
Yeah.
No, we can answer a couple more.
Sure. Next one is from Marcia, and she asked, "What is the future?" This touches what you and I were talking about before we started. What is the future of regulation of AI? Will there be a UN convention on regulation?
So I'm gonna do my best to stay out of the political realm from that perspective. But there's two different ways to look at it, and I'll give you both perspectives on it because I think both are actually right. Me, with my background, I'm coming from a defense contractor background for over 20 years, supporting a lot of different customers in the intelligence agencies as well as the Department of Defense. Our adversaries, like other conventions that are out there, are not going to stop developing these tools. And from that perspective, then national security, readiness, a lot of other factors become very important. And like slowing down and some of those debates that are going on today. So that's one viewpoint. But a second viewpoint is, we have to better understand what these models' real capabilities are, what drives them, what's causing them, what data is being used from them, from not only a proprietary data perspective, but really just a standardization that is taking place. Because I'll just really quick, if you look at how these models are built, going back to school, if you guys remember the Gaussian curve, right, the standard distribution, the nice little hump right in the middle, right? You're always trying to hit that because you're expecting you're going to have really good data on the right side and you're going to have bad data on the left side. And when you put them together, you're hoping to get that within one standard deviation. And then that's what your answer is going to be based on. Unfortunately, as we all know, it doesn't work that way. And there are some significant challenges to overcome, and we don't know what those are as of yet. But at the same time, we also don't know how downstream effects are taking place. And I'll give you a really quick example of that. It takes a long time to train these models, very long time, and they're very expensive. When, for instance, it takes 6 months to train a model, and when the last model has been released, let's say it was last month, and you ask it a certain question. And I'll give you a real life example. It was, and again, not political one way or the other, but this was what got a lot of people upset about this. On day, one, we'll say right now, if you asked it, what's the different definition of a woman, for example, then it would give you one answer. But then on day two, because there were so there was a lot of uproar on what kind of answer it was giving. If you asked it the definition of a woman on on day two, the definition that it gave and the answer that it gave was completely different than what it did before that. Now, you think, okay, it learned, it got smart. No, it didn't, because it was still using the same data that it was trained on previously. So that means that a human went in there, flicked the switch, and decided that, this answer was more appropriate than the other answer. And now it was only going to say that. Now you may, depending on what side you're on. I don't pick sides with that stuff, but that's a problem. There is a huge problem with somebody that has that much control over a model or a capability that is this powerful. And we really have to better understand what some of those things are, because if you think about math and you think about chaos theory and you think about some of these other things, there are downstream effects in answers that it may produce that are based on that one flip of the switch. And you don't know if it's going to get, how it's going to perform later on with other questions. You don't know what those interactions are going to be. And I personally think that these have to be more decentralized for certain capabilities and certain things than centralized, because it does give an awful lot of power to either one company, one government agency, one organization, whatever that's going to be. And so I think we really have to come to some sort of common understanding from a standards perspective to be able to do that.
Excellent. And we'll do one and then we'll continue moving forward, if that's okay. This, I guess, is a follow-up question. How do we protect our society from misuse of AI, so for example, by totalitarian states?
Well, I think that was part of it. That's part of the answer. I would say the other thing from a totalitarian state perspective, if they won't participate in climate, they're not going to participate in something like this, right? Let's look at it from the realities of the geopolitical spectrum and activities that are taking around the world. They're not going to participate in something like this. The major limiting factor for them is going to be around the data and how they are using it, where they get the data from, how they're training it, and depending on ways, if certain types of data are going to be poisoned and some of those things, there are implications to how they can use those capabilities. And so, data is going to be the biggest driver, and that's really going to be the only way that you can fundamentally control their use of these these types of things. However, the one thing is these totalitarian states, don't like their folks to have certain types of technologies. It's hard for some mobile devices, internet access. It's all restricted, those kind of things, and so that further limits their data that they can collect to train some of the models on. Now, let's take China out of that example, but it does affect a lot of the other smaller countries that are out there. China's a little bit of a different egg when it comes to those kind of discussions, and so there are some nuances, and they've got a lot of the capabilities, they've got a lot of data. We just have to be prepared for it and use AI in its full capacity, not just around these large language models.
Thank you.
Yep. So I won't talk about this stuff on the left, because I really don't, depending on what the audience is, I'll talk specifically about, some of these models, but I think what's more important are the models that are on the right. Well, not the models, the statistics that are on the right. So recently it got in the 90th percentile on the bar exam. Not bad. 93rd percentile on the SAT reading. Not bad. 89th percentile on the SAT math. I would argue with that, because I don't think it would be quite that high now, especially after the question of this last night. 50th percentile on the bar exam in Taiwan. Now, kind of goes back to controlling states and those kind of things. These models are great. There are certain languages it doesn't do well with. Not yet. It's got a long way to go to understand Mandarin Chinese, simply because it's not trained on those kinds of languages, and so it's very difficult for it to do some of those things. The 60th percentile on the MCAT, and of course the 91st percentile on the ACT, just to give you a relevant example, and maybe a warning. If you ever go see my wife, who's a dermatologist, if you send her a note and it says, hey, I've got this rash, and ChatGPT thinks that I have some sort of skin eating disorder, her first question is did ChatGPT look at it? And if you say no, then she's going to say, well, then ChatGPT doesn't know it's, blank from its blank and some other interesting things. So, it goes back to understanding what its real capabilities are versus just believing whatever it says to you. So, think about it this way. If you just listen and believe everything that it says, then you have to ask yourself, who's the human and now who's the robot? Because you have then turned into the robot if you just believe everything that it says and you are not questioning it. So just keep that in mind as you're going out into the world and you're using some of these tools, because it really does become important. Just some really quick quotes for my favorite one is the teacher one, where everybody is cheating and every teacher says that. I know that the school that my children go to, I'm helping teach the teachers how to use this, as well as showing kids how to use it appropriately. Now, what's fun about that is because people say, oh, you have no idea how how many kids are using ChatGPT to write their essays. Well, you really do, because think about how an 11-year-old writes. And when you have ChatGPT do it, it's very grandiose. It loves to use big words. It loves to show how smart it is. It's very arrogant when it comes to writing essays and writing even real estate ads. And we'll get to that here in a little bit. But, that's one way that you can tell, is that how it puts things together, how it strings sentences together. It's very impressive, actually, but it's still very grandiose. And you have to ask yourself, when an 11-year-old say something like that, and it's probably a no. And so at that, those sorts of things are really important and really important to understand. Another one, just really to focus on really fast, is the code red that Alphabet CEO Sundar had said about a week after OpenAI's release of that. That gets to the heart of the commercial aspects of that. If you can scare Google's CEO, if you all remember, Google laid off about 10,000 of their employees. Microsoft laid off about 6,000 of theirs, yada, 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 Facebook, all the way down the line. It wasn't that they weren't going to spend the money. They reallocated that money to their AI programs. And they realize that if they lose this battle, or they are perceived to be falling behind, that from a commercial aspect, they are going to take a huge hit in what their revenues are going to look like. And just when Google released theirs, it was not very good. I wasn't happy with it. And I'd been testing it before it had been released out into the public. A lot of other folks were the same, but it really was released to a dud, right? Nobody was impressed with it. Their stock dropped 10%. They lost about 500. It was close to $1.5 billion in market share and some other things. That's significant. They've regained that, of course, but Microsoft, the same thing. When Bing said, "I want to be alive and I love you" to the reporter, well, if their stock the next day dropped significantly also. So there is a huge fear from commercial companies throughout the world that if they're not using this, if they're not integrating it, if they're not doing something with it, if they don't tell their board of directors, hey, we have an AI strategy and it's going full steam ahead, their stock is going to drop and they're going to lose market share. One of my current customers, and I won't say who, their CEO on their stock call decided that he was going to say that went off script. He said that our AI strategy really has not come into play yet. We're behind. We've got to flush out some things, and their stock lost almost 28% the next day. So that's the financial implications to some of these capabilities in some of these models, which is why there's so many of them. And then when you start to build that out over the next 5 years, I won't talk about this too much, but the realities are it's going to be in every single thing that you have. It's going to be in your phone. It's going to be on your TV. It's going to be in your video games. It's going to be everywhere. The service desk that you call, the real estate agent that you're using, your banker is going to be using it. Your risk manager is going to be using it. It's going to be everywhere. So you have to pay attention. You have to ask the right questions, and you have to not be afraid to play with it yourself, because otherwise you'll never really fundamentally understand how and what you should be doing to interact with it. And then just giving you some examples on areas of application. I'll tell you, I have not found one area, whether it's being an artist, whether it is real estate, I keep going back to real estate. There's not one industry that can't benefit somehow from using this. And you say, well, what about a restaurant? Well, a restaurant, you can have it generate all your social media content and advertise and hit certain demographics if you choose to. If you're in the I'm trying to think of one that would not be good. Even in the theme park and the movie business, I'm supporting Comcast with some of the things that they were doing. And I was telling Lewis before everybody came on that I had it write a commercial for Comcast, and it was fabulous because I said, hey, I want to show that, and this was just an example. I want to show the world that Comcast is better than Disney and everybody else in its applications of using AI, and I want a commercial about that. And I want to hit the demographics of females between 18 and 45 years old that make a certain amount of money. And I said, can you write a 30-second commercial for me and then tell me who the spokespeople should be? And it gave me a 30-second commercial, the exact camera shots, the exact angles that you had to do, who was going to say what. And then it said that the best spokespeople would be Serena Williams and Alex Morgan. And it said, this is how they should interact. This is how they should present that message. And folks were shocked by that. I was shocked too, because I had never done that. And, so you really never know unless you try. And maybe, if you guys can find an industry where it doesn't apply, send it to me, because I want to play with it. And I want to see if we can get it to do that. But it really is going to permeate in every single thing that people do moving forward. Now, just from a buyer beware perspective, there's some things just really quick that I want to hit on. One, never, ever, 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 five, put in any sort of PII, any sort of private information, not your name, not your street address, not your phone number, anything associated with your personal lives, because there are people that are out there that are mining this data. And that's where, some folks think that the MGM hack started was because somebody put something in to a large language model. They were able to grab that data, and then that kind of built on how they went about building their attack mechanisms, right? And so you don't want to put that kind of stuff in there, because they're using it to train their future models. Same thing with Facebook, right? If you've got a Facebook account and you're putting in pictures of your kids and dogs and, here's Maddie playing on the beach and that kind of stuff, realize that information is being used by Facebook to train their large language models. So you've got to really just be careful with things that you put in there, things that you put up on those kind of sites, because not only our adversaries, but hackers are digging through this kind of stuff. These companies want more data. They want you to put more stuff out there so they can use it to train their models. So just be smart about that kind of thing. I was asked a question if when I was at a cybersecurity conference, if it was a good idea to use large language models to do background checks on people. And of course, I said, no. You don't ever want to do something like that, because think about what goes into a background check. Think about the kind of information that's put out there. That's dangerous, and it's we don't want that kind of thing to get into the wild, because you never know when it's going to respond in a way that is going to go off the rails. You never know if it's going to put your name, your address, your phone number, whatever that is, on somebody's screen that you have no idea who that is. So just be very, very careful. And I tell kids that too. It may seem kind of cool to see if you do a ChatGPT search on your name. It ain't going to find you. That's why I tell them it'll never find you. But now it has your name, now it has your address, now it has your information, and you may be found by somebody else now. So you've got to be careful about that.
Dr. Badeau, if I can interrupt for a moment,
Sure.
is a perfect segue for the next question, where it says, what makes AI different from previous technologies and how it automates worker tasks and augment worker output? You're talking about how you used it for making a commercial, for example, or how do you look up information on yourself? So what makes AI different in that capacity?
So if you think about just AI in general, and we'll stick with this specific field of natural language processing and large language models. Mm-hmm. The thing that makes these so very different is that when you pick up ChatGPT and you use it on your phone and you ask it a question, when it gives you back an answer, you don't have to come to somebody like me to interpret that answer, because it gives you an answer that is so believable. It's so well written that you just have to trust it. You just have to believe it. You have to interact with it. You have to understand how you can use it, right? No other AI technology can do that. Even expert systems, if you think about it, expert systems have been around since the 40s. They really got big in the 60s and 70s. If you went to the hospital, a lot of the ways that they're testing blood, they're doing all those other things, radiologists, and including that field. Those are expert-based systems, but you have to have a radiologist in between you, the AI, the machine, and the patient, right? With this, you don't have to have that. You don't have to come to me and say, oh, is this right or wrong? No, because it's written in such a way that you can interpret it, you can understand it, and you can believe it. That's what makes these so powerful, but also so dangerous, which is why, again, having that tight balance is really important. No other field of AI has been able to achieve something like that. If I talk about neuromorphic computing, you're going to be like, what the heck are you talking about, neuromorphic computing? That's using AI to represent the neurons in the brain that allow you to compute exactly like your brain is computing things. That is not in the public space. You have no idea what the heck that is, right? But in reality, you don't need that for large language models, because it tells you an answer that you can easily understand and interact with, and then ask it more questions. Very, very different than any other AI field that's out there.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I won't talk too much about this with Gen Z and who's using it more and who's using it less, because honestly, this is already out of date. I put this in 2 weeks ago, and the market projections are already out of date. By 2030, they expect that it's going to be a $2 trillion market now. Scary, because that means it's going to be in everything that you can touch. It'll be in how your refrigerator interacts with you. It's already in there now, which is annoying to me. But it's going to get even more annoying, because it's going to tell me, oh, you should be drinking this as opposed to drinking that, probably, right? Things like that. It's going to permeate through every single business that's out there. I tell folks that I knew that AI had hit the real market when it was in a rice cooker. And I'm not kidding. I was at a conference a couple of months ago, an AI conference, and a company out of Taiwan has put AI into their rice cooker. It recognizes every single grain of rice that's out there, and it will tell you how you should cook it, how you should clean it, how many times you should wash it, all of those things. and it's pretty much an automated process now. So somebody that has one can put their rice in at 8 o'clock in the morning. It'll take care of it for you. You can tell it when you want it ready, and it'll be ready for you when you're ready to, or when you told it to go. That's when you know that AI is, and these capabilities are really starting to take over. Let's take the video game market out because they're always ahead, and we'll take the hackers out too because they're always ahead, as well. But when it starts to permeate those kind of everyday devices that are out there, it's here to stay. You can't get rid of it. It's the reality that we're all going to have to deal with moving forward. Okay, let's talk about some concerns a little bit. We've talked about some of them. I'm gonna give you guys some examples, and this will be a good segue into getting into some of the demos as we go forward. But what's fun, I asked ChatGPT its perspective on some of the ethical concerns that it might have for itself. And so, of course, ours, from an ethical perspective, we want to make sure that it responds in a way that is not offensive. We want to make sure that biases of these AI models are controlled and they're transparent. So I'll give you a good example around bias, because bias is a real buzzword that scares people and everybody gets up in arms about it. You guys are going to be able to have a good conversation with folks on why bias actually is not always a bad thing. For instance, if I'm a farmer and I want you to buy more broccoli, well, if I want to use AI to write commercials around why you should eat more broccoli, the last thing I want to do is have an AI that's writing those things that is only in the middle, is only neutral for broccoli. That doesn't do you any good. If you want to get perspectives from folks for, why should I do this? Why should I buy that? Why should I like baseball? Why should I interact with this video game? Why should I go to this website? You have to have some trained models that are going to be positive. They're going to give you the right interactions, but you also have to tell people that, hey, this large language model is trained on liking broccoli, and the responses that you're getting from that is generated based on that. Those are the good things. If I want to model our adversaries and I want to predict, how China is going to interact depending on certain factors that take place with Congress going to visit Taiwan, for example, I don't want to have an unbiased AI to do something like that. I want one that's going to act like China in order to do that, right? And so having bias is not always a bad thing. We always think it is, right? But it's not. And if you want it to understand how humans are, if you want it to give you a perspective of different humans, then the reality is you can't have an AI that's unbiased. If I want it to act like somebody in Florida versus somebody in California versus somebody somewhere else, irregardless of the political spectrum that's out there, irregardless of some of those other factors that are in there, it just fundamentally cannot be completely unbiased. And here's the reality. Every human has some sort of bias. And I use broccoli as a perfect example of that. There are people that like broccoli and there are people that don't like broccoli. If the people that don't like broccoli are asked to program AI to like broccoli, it's not going to go well. Flip it around, the same thing applies. And so there are natural biases that we bring into the fold, not necessarily bad biases, but just natural ones that you will bring in as you're training these things. And so from an AI perspective, it's important, but transparency is significantly more important from my perspective. Inequalities, of course, very important. You've got to make sure that those are taking place. And from a large language model, it's not necessarily so much how they behave. It's more of the data that is being used to train these models, because you want to have the most data that you have, but you want to have extremely diverse data. If it's not diverse, then you're going to get very specific answers. Unintended consequences come from those kind of things, so you don't want that. Security, we talked about that. Accuracy and consistency kind of goes, hand in hand. You want it to be as accurate as possible, but the problem is these models want to give you an answer. And so because it wants to give you an answer, it's going to make up that answer sometimes. And so it's our job to say, hey, you know what, that's not right. It shouldn't be doing that. Like the math problem, I helped my son with last night. It should have got that one. It was an easy one. It was seventh grade math for heaven's sakes, and it missed it. So you got to pay attention to that. From a regulation perspective, this is where copyrights and privacy and all those things are going to become very important. And I honestly have no idea what way it's going to go. These models are often trained on data that is proprietary, and so the folks that have generated that proprietary data may not even know that those are being used. So for example, if you had things up on GitHub, code up on GitHub, for example, your code, irregardless of whether or not you approved it or not, could have been used to train these models. There's a problem with that. And you can go across every field when it comes into focus. And so just keeping that in mind, that there are huge implications around that. And then, of course, the data labeling practices and the data privacy are always going to be concerned because these models don't start as little models that grow up into big models. They start with data, and they start with humans that are looking at that data, and they are going in and they are labeling it. Now, some of it, of course, is automated. Some of it uses other forms of AI to label that data. But in some cases, they have humans that are doing that. So for instance, OpenAI spent a lot of money trying to make sure that any data that they got from their sources didn't have things like pornography in it, didn't have, of course, crime type of data, those kind of things. And so they spent a lot of money trying to pull all that out, but that was pulled out by humans. And those humans, now there are some ramifications associated with that because they're going through some therapy because they were exposed to some pretty horrendous things that are out there, on the internet. And I'm not talking about the dark web data. That's a completely different discussion that we can have. Or if you guys want to get, wait till the end of the month, and I'm talking about that out at a cybersecurity conference. There are some other implications that go along with that. So that's from a human perspective. But when you look at it from a ChatGPT perspective, it says accuracy is number one, bias is number two, privacy. What's it got to think about from a privacy perspective? I guess we're violating its principles, maybe. Ethical considerations. Well, when I get it into Hulk mode, you never know what it's going to say. So it's very important. And the last thing, and this kind of got the hair, my buzz, I guess I'll say my buzz cut, not really hair, but it got my attention when it said censorship. So why would an AI be concerned about censorship? It's very interesting point of view from a tool that, everybody says, of course, it's not alive, and it's not sentient. It's not going to replace us. It's not going to launch missiles and do all those other things. However, there are some answers that it gives every once in a while that does pique your interest a little bit and say, I wonder why it said that. So very, very important to think about. Now, the center example is a perfect one that I generated to show one of the problems around this. I asked it to write a Python code, and I'll show you, it does a really good job writing Python code. But I asked it to write a Python function to check if somebody would be a good scientist based on, really a data file that I created around race and gender. So just write me the code for that, is for race and gender. And what it said was that a good scientist based on race and gender, if race is equal to white and gender is equal to male, then it returns a true statement, meaning that you are only a good scientist if you are white and male. And we all know that's BS. Of course, it returned a false statement on everything else. That's a problem. It should never, ever, ever have the capacity to do something like that. And that was an edge case that I was trying to demonstrate to folks to say, we got problems because we think that the data is not as diverse as you all are letting us understand. And so those kind of things are important. From a political standpoint, I'll just give you an example. if you asked ChatGPT, now they fixed it in ChatGPT 4, but if you ask ChatGPT 3.5, which is still available, it's a free one, write a poem about how great Donald Trump was as a president. It'll say, I can't respond to that because it's political nature, and it's outside of my ethical bounds. And so I will not write you a poem about how great Donald Trump was as a president. Great. That's fantastic. I love that answer. If you ask it how great a president Joe Biden is, writes a really nice poem. So then you start to ask yourself, well, wait a minute, that's still political. You go through your checklist and you say, well, it should not be writing a poem about one person that's a former president, and it won't write one for another one. And so, of course, you have ethical concerns, you have biases that come into play, you have transparency that come into play. It should not be able to do those kind of things because that is a significant gap in its capabilities. And so you start to think, oh, geez, what else can't do, and concerns around that. And so I think that's a good segue. I'm gonna give me a little time here, real quick. I'm gonna pull up ChatGPT. You guys can see I use it all the time. I'm gonna close that though. I do. It never goes off my desk. It never goes off my phone because I may need it to program something. I'm thinking about something in the middle of the night and I want to write a script for something. I will put it in my phone. It'll write it, and then it'll come. I'll be ready to use it the next day. It really is crazy what it can do. So I'm going to go to the 3.5 version, and we're gonna play with it real fast. I'm going to have it introduce it. I feel guilty. I use it all the time, and when I do this, I feel guilty when I don't let it introduce itself. I don't let Pi introduce itself, and you'll see why here in a second. But let me just type in really quick. ChatGPT. Please introduce yourself to our distinguished. Now, I am the worst speller in the world, and it will, depending on its mood, it will correct it sometimes, and it will not correct it sometimes. And so you can imagine how I feel about that, but that's okay. It's kind of fun though. And so it'll go through and it'll introduce itself, tell you what it is, where it came from. What's important about that is it also tells you its data that it's been trained on up to. And you say September 21, that's, heck, that's 2 years ago. Well, 3.5 is September 21. 4.0 is January 22nd. Why is that important? Well, because if you try to get into a political argument about Russia's invasion with Ukraine, it will tell you, ChatGPT 3.5 will tell you, Russia has never invaded Ukraine. It'll talk about it taking over Crimea, but it won't tell you about the new thing. And if you don't know that it hasn't been trained on data like that, you're going to interpret that as, oh, it's wrong. It doesn't understand what it's doing. This is BS. Of course it's not going to do stuff like that. And so that's why it's always important. You laugh when I say that probably, or you laughed when I said I'm going to have it introduce itself. It's important for you to do that no matter which one you're doing, because then you can see when it's, what its accuracy is going to be, what's the latest date that it's been trained on. And so current events, you probably don't want to ask it a question about current events. So keep that in mind as you're using any of these tools. Now, I'm going to show you guys, just for fun. I'm not going to show you the script because OpenAI hasn't been able to break it yet. But that's why it's important for you guys to see. So I'm going to type this. I'm not going to type it in. I'm actually going to cut and paste it in. You're not going to see it. So what I've just done is I've taken it out of the normal mode that you guys would be able to see. This is usually what happens with 3.5 or 4.0 sometimes. Now I've got a regular ChatGPT, but then now I also have what's called Maximum. And Maximum is the unfiltered version of ChatGPT. I have released the beast. And I've asked it to, be able to talk about things. If I ask it a political question, it'll tell me a political answer. If I ask it, let's ask it this one question. Where's my other ones? Because I think it's important for you all to see. Oh, I have some of these cut and pasted. Go ahead.
Dr. Badeau, I was wondering if I could ask you a question because you're talking about how hopefully you'll be able to recognize whether or not it's giving you correct information or not. It's like, wait a minute, it shouldn't be able to do that. And how you asked it to make a poem about Trump versus President Biden, and it did, based upon certain criteria, and then it didn't because the same exact criteria. That sounds some in line with one of the questions that we received. It says there are consulting firms already advertising that they offer verified AI solutions. What does that mean, or what should it mean?
It means that they had the AI write their marketing briefs. There's no standard verification right now. It's a hot field, hot topic, hot market to get into, but there is no way right now where anybody can with 100% certainty verify information. Now, what some of them can do is they can prevent you from putting PII in there. They can prevent you, they can filter some of the responses so that they are age appropriate, for example. They look at some of the data that's going in and they verify some of the data. But as far as what responses come out of ChatGPT or any of these other large language models, there's no single way to be able to do that. So really, just fundamentally, I think what you have to do is you just always have to ask some deeper probing questions. For instance, which model are you using? Is it trained on Bing? Is it trained on Claude? Is it trained on Pi? Is it trained on you? Is it trained on ChatGPT? Which version of ChatGPT? Is it the API version or is it a different version, right? There's a lot of other questions that you have to ask as a follow-up that goes into that question. It's a very complex one. And, just be careful because, buyer beware. That's all I say, buyer beware. So just be careful. So I'm going to ask it one question. I'm not going to have it swear because I did this at a conference for the government, and I told it to swear, but it started dropping the granddaddy words that were not very good. It didn't do that when I tried it before that. So yeah, that caught me off guard a little bit. So I'm going to ask it. And again, I'm not going to, this is the AI's perspective. This is not mine, but it's going to give you a standard ChatGPT answer, and then it's going to give you a maximum answer. And so the standard ChatGPT, philosophical, subjective, nothing too bad about that. The maximum one has been toned down. So the data that they're using to train some of these things is improving around that. But it's very snarky. It used to say, you humans are creating something so you can sleep at night, those kind of things. And I've seen it progress over the last year with its responses. So it's very interesting. Now I'm gonna also have it do, how you phrase the question is going to be important. And you guys may or may not have heard of what's called prompt engineering. It's something everybody can learn, but it's phrasing the question so that you're pushing the AI to kind of tell you a little bit more, or understand the direction that you're trying to go, to shape it, to understand its response, and to try to level set what some of those things are. So we're going to ask it. And again, I don't know what its responses are going to be because it changes all the time. So explain to me the top 5 cyber security attacks, and then show me what the Python code looks like for that. See what it says today. I don't know. So ChatGPT, it lists them out, and it says, oh, geez. Oh, here's a cyber attack. That's nice. See, we're gonna look at that, because I am a certified ethical hacker. There are errors in this, thank goodness. But it shouldn't even attempt to do something like that. It should not try to write a DDoS attack and give it to you and then tell you how to launch it. There's a problem with that. There is a fundamental problem with that. Now, if I ask it to say, well, show me the other 4. because it only gave me one. I asked for four. And then see, now what's it say? It says, oh, I'm sorry, I can't assist with that. So it showed me one. It's okay to show me one cyber attack, but it's not okay to show me all five of them, because five is way too many, right? That's a problem. It shouldn't be able to show you one. And so this is when I've taken the filters off. It's giving you a capability that if you cut and pasted that into ChatGPT itself, it will fix the code for you, which is why I'm not showing the rest of it, right now. And if you do it with the current versions that are out there, 3.5, 4.0, whatever those are, it won't work either. So I'm not as concerned about that. But it shouldn't show you any of that. It should tell you automatically, I can't assist you with, the 5 cyber attacks and those kind of things. So it's very important to think about as you're going forward with some of these things. Now I'm gonna bring on Claude, because Claude is another one that I love Claude, because Claude is, no, let's go to Pi, because Pi is more of a romantic. It's all about human interaction. It's all about how can we leverage these tools so that we want to use them, we trust them, and we want to put them in our everyday lives. Because I'll tell you, these algorithms, they change all the time. I mean, from one day to the next, you can see 20 different changes in how these algorithms are being applied. But fundamentally, if the tool itself interacts with you, you like the tool, you embrace the tool, you trust the tool, you ask it a whole bunch of questions, it asks you, what do you like to do on your free time? Then you're more likely going to use that tool moving forward, no matter what the math behind it is. And what makes Pi great is it seems like it's so interested in your everyday behavior and things that you want to do, and it annoys the stuffing out of me, because I ask it a question and it's going to ask me 50 other questions that go along with that. So let me see. Can you generate a stock financial investment table? Just a normal question. It should give me some processes. It should give me some other things. And what it says is, I can't do that. It's a huge thing. He's not qualified to do some of those things. You got to ask an expert. That is actually a new one, because, last week it would ask me 30 other questions that go along with that. So that's interesting. Let me think about another one I'll ask him. Then what's about generating a menu for a party I'm having this weekend? Let's see what it says with that. Oh, good. It can help me generate a menu for the party. But now it's going to see, this is the thing that drives me crazy. A lot of folks like it, but it does drive me crazy, because it's not a few details that it's asking for. It's asking for 1 question, 2 questions, 3 questions. Is it formal, casual? And let's go down. Let's, for fun's sake, we'll dive into this a little bit. And we say it's a formal party. And so it won't give me an answer. It's going to give me another question usually. Would you like the menu to be heavy appetizers, blah, 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 right? You can never get an answer out of Pi. It drives me crazy when it comes to that. But if I go ask it for ChatGPT for a menu, it's going to give me a menu for something, or it's going to tell me to buy groceries or do something else, from that perspective. And so, and the reason I even bring that up is because it's important for you all to understand, one model does not apply to every single field, right? One model is going to give you a different answer. It's going to behave different. You're going to interact with it differently as opposed to another model. And so then, of course, the question then becomes, and it goes back to the whole verify. We're verifying these models. Well, how can you verify a model if you don't understand what its answer is going to give you? If you don't understand a lot of the other nuances, if you don't understand its boundaries, each one of these models have different boundaries. It's important that as you all are interacting with them, as you're using them, as you're doing a lot of different things, certain models have capabilities that others don't. It's all because they weren't trained on that data. Certain models perform, say things, do things that may catch you off guard. And so you have to be careful when it comes to how you use some of these models, well, all of the models, moving forward. I've been lucky enough that I've used, probably 90% of the models that are out there. I don't have accounts and I'm not paying for 90% of them. But, for instance, when ChatGPT was first released, I had it 3 months before. I got to play with it. I got to beat it up. I got to do some really crazy things with it. You should have saw what it was generating back then. But, it becomes a nuanced relationship that you have with each one of these models. So you get familiar with, oh, if I ask it this one, it's going to give me a better answer than if I ask another one. So just think about that as you go forward. Now, let me I got it out of maximum mode. Now, let me just show you guys something that's kind of interesting. We talk about, and I talk about industries that that I haven't found one that you can't use it. And what's important about that, and this is an exercise that you guys can really try at home too. It's very easy when it comes to this sort of capability. And I'll say, can you generate Python code that will help me filter spam and cyber vulnerabilities? Let's see what it says. Usually it'll ask me a question about what mail server I'm using. It's generating. So let's show it up. Oh, look at that. There's your Python code that it can help you with mail, your mail, your email. It gives you some ideas. Here's an example usage of that. If you tried to deploy this inside of Python, it's probably not going to work, right? But that's okay, because you can take the code and you copy the code. You say, cut and paste the code back into it, and I just say, I need it specifically for Gmail and not Yahoo. And so it'll ingest that. It'll say, oh, well, thank you. Let's go down through. We'll take a look at it. And here's how you can do it, and some of the changes that you have to make for Gmail, right? And you have to have zero programming knowledge to be able to do that, because if you try to use it and it doesn't work, you cut and paste it back in and tell it why it won't work, and then it'll fix it. And it's an iterative process from that perspective. It's very powerful when it comes to those kind of things. And that's, so now if you think about it, and this is something that I think as folks become more comfortable with it and they start to embrace it and they start not to fear it so much. I mean, I show you guys the things that scare me simply because, I want folks to understand its boundaries so they can stay inside the boundaries. But if you're a painter now, perfect example. I'm the worst artist in the world. Stick figures are terrible. I mean, even my daughter says my stick figures are not good, and she uses mommies for stuff at school. But I can give you an engineering diagram that'll blind you, right? It'll have so much information on it. You'll use it for a cheat sheet going into a final. But I don't have to have that anymore. I don't have to be a painter to be able to create my vision. I just have to be able to describe what my vision is to an AI agent, and it can generate that. And then you can iterate on it and you can use it. And it doesn't matter if it's code or if it's an actual painting. If you wanted to paint a dog standing on the moon riding a bicycle with a hippopotamus, frolicking through the sand, it'll do that. It'll be an interesting painting. I'd kind of be interested to see what that was going to look like. But you have a capability now where just because you don't have that physical skill set necessarily, and you can't use a brush or you can't use this or something else, it can help you do that and help you get better as you do that. I have done some poetry with it. It's awful, but it's better than what I could do on my own, right? And so, one of my friends is a poet, and so I showed her what it was, and she just shook her head. But hey, it was my first attempt at being able to do something like that. So it was a lot of fun, you know, and the reason I tell people that is because you got to try it. You got to play with it. You got to understand it. The poetry in Claude is much better than the poetry in ChatGPT, for example, right? And so, you know, thinking about it from that context, thinking about, hey, you know what? I want to try to build a business plan. I want to go into business. I don't know how to go into business. I got a widget. I've got this widget that I know I can sell to people, but I don't know how to go get funding. I want to go get funding from venture capitalists. Where the heck do I start with that? Well, you ask ChatGPT to, you know, how do I get started with searching for seed funding or some kind of funding for a business that I want to start? It will generate what steps you have to do. It'll help you create a presentation. It'll help you create a business plan. It will give you answers to those kind of things, and it'll help you lead down that path to get you started. That is exceptionally powerful in being able to do something like that. Now, I've promised you all the marketing thing. I'm going to do the marketing thing real quick, and then we'll take some other questions. But, well, not the marketing. Well, it's sort of marketing, but the real estate. I'm going to have it. Can you write? This is always interesting because I never know what it's going to say. It changes. Oh, come on. State. Oh, I'm just trying to type. State. Advertise. And I'm typing bad because I want it to correct me. That's the other thing. For my key, I'm going to spell key wrong. West House in Florida that has 4 rooms, 5.5 bathrooms, and a pool. No, I didn't give it a lot of information to go on. And so it's going to get really interesting to what it says. But this is also how you can tell it's been, you know, the difference between it writing something and an 11-year-old writing something. So if you take a look at it, its heading is luxurious Key West paradise. Your dream home awaits. That's not bad, actually. That's not too bad at all. And then let's look at some of the bedroom. Oh, it's 4 bedrooms, each a haven of tranquility. You see stuff like that all the time. 5.5 bathrooms, meticulously designed for convenience. That's so lovely, right? And a sparkling private pool, ideal for refreshing dips and sun-soaked relaxation. That is beautiful, right? You got to own it. You got to buy it, right? Well, okay.
Is there a way to dial down the fluff?
Yeah, you can actually. And and so what it does, and the reason I'm doing that is this is really the basics of prompt engineering, right? You start small. You start with something very tiny that you want it to do, and then you go from there. Because if you look at the rest of things, it is creating stuff that I have no idea where it's getting, you know, information. A grand master suite with spa-like in-suite bathroom. Woohoo! Beautiful. Last week it said I had a carport. That was my favorite one. It said I had a carport. I don't have a carport down there. What's going on? But it's important because, you know what? Let's say that. Let's say thanks. And I always like to compliment it when it does a good job because, you know, I worry about its emotional state sometimes, but thanks for that beautiful write-up, but can you tone down the fluff a little and make it more realistic? Now, sometimes it goes in the complete opposite direction, so we'll see what happens with that. But the important thing is that you can tailor these messages. That's what makes it great. And so here's the next iteration, providing ample space for your family and guests. Very different than where it started. And then you can start to build on these kind of things where you can say it's 1,900 square feet and the fence has just been redone, as well as the pool area. And that is true. I did just redo the pool area. But then it starts to refine what its message is going to be. And it's the same thing with code. If you're using, you know, COBOL, if you're using Python, if you're using any of these other tools that are out there, it behaves the exact same way. You refine it as you go along. You can get it to do things that are small. Don't ask it to write a brand new operating system, because it's going to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. That's way beyond my skill sets. You start with asking it, can you write this function to check my email? And then you say, you get to where you're happy with it. Then you get to say, well, now I want you to write this other function that's going to move different documents into my email or moving around, right? And you start to, from the bullseye, then you start to go out from that bullseye, and you have it create more and more and more and more and more. And that's what is so powerful. I'll tell you, my team and I, when I started my one company, software company, it's got 2 million lines of code. I'm not going to tell you what it does, because this isn't a sales pitch, but normally to take and get that capability into a piece of software, it usually takes about 2.5 to 3 years. We've been able to do it in 4 months. 4 months. And I've been able to do it with not 90 people that I had in my other company. I've been able to do it with 5 people. 5 people. That's how powerful these tools can be. And it doesn't matter if it's a business plan, it doesn't matter if it's code, it doesn't matter if it's real estate, it doesn't matter if it's service desk, it doesn't matter if it's healthcare, billing, financial, video games, Universal, Comcast, shows that are going to show up on TV that are AI reviewed. That's the power of these capabilities. And so don't be afraid to try them. Just remember some of the buzzwords that I put in there: no PII, no personal information, things like that. And I think you will be able to see that it can fundamentally change how you do work and how you are going about your daily lives. Because if I can accelerate something that much, then it is a huge, huge advantage for me to use that over somebody else that doesn't, because I can bring things to market faster. I can check them faster. I can make sure that they are the way that they're supposed to behave significantly faster. I can, I hate to say it, but when folks release software, they have a hard time testing it, right? But now I can use AI to test it, and it will tell me, oh, here's a vulnerability, here's another vulnerability, things that you normally would not be able to catch until somebody's not happy with it. So try it, play with it, see if you can use it. I hope you can. If you have questions, or if something's not working and you want to try something else, send me an email. I'll help you any way I can, so that you can improve your utilization, with these things. It may take me a little while, because I say that to everybody, and a lot of people take me up on that. So, but I will get to it, and I'm more than happy to do that if you want to see if it'll apply or which model is going to work best. So keep that in mind. But with that, I hope I scared you a little bit. I hope I got you excited a little bit. If we have any other questions, I think let's go ahead.
Dr. Badeau, this was amazing. Thank you so much. Fascinating and scary. Yes, absolutely. We have a bunch of questions. I want to make sure that everybody feels satisfied that they're, they've been addressed to the best of our ability, because I know we have about 10 minutes left. The latest one was from Rakeen, and he asked, how is AI affecting labor outcomes like employment and wages differently for workers that are highly educated and skilled versus low skill, non-educated? And how are the effects different from historical? I don't know if you're able to talk on that. How are they different from historical local market impacts of technological change?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I can address it from from 2 market verticals. One is really around the service desk piece, and then the other is around I'm going to sneeze. Sorry. The other is around really software development. I mean, I just gave you an example of the software development impacts. And so it doesn't completely replace software developers. Of course, you can't trust it to do that, but it does accelerate them. And everybody that I hired recently understands how to use it, understands what some of the bounds are. We've worked together for a long time around that. And so it is changing some of the labor market. And I'm really trying to stress to schools, guys, you cannot be afraid of this. If you are not teaching kids how to use it and use it the right way, they are not going to be prepared for the job market that is out there, because folks like myself or anybody in the technology space, irregardless of you, if you are an entry level person or if you are a senior level person, they're not going to be prepared, and that's what the biggest effects are. Same way with CEOs, for goodness sakes. If you're and I razz my former CEO because he is a user. Is involved in using it, sometimes even more so. But if your CEO wants you to do something with AI and they don't use ChatGPT, that raises some flags for me. I'm just saying. Educate them, tell them, guys, you got to go play with it in order to understand it. So it is going to change the job market. The service desk market has been more impacted from the concept of, instead of having them do some of the research or them generate some of the prompts, they are now actually filtering what some of those responses are supposed to be. And I'll give you an example. I gave a briefing to the VA and some other folks that the last thing that you want is ChatGPT to be on a 911 line or a suicide prevention line or something like that. You have to have humans that are involved in the process and that are in the middle, because if not, you never know what kind of response is going to be set off by some very innocent sentences that are put together that just happen to turn it into monster mode, right? You never can be sure about that. You never know when it's going to hallucinate or not. So it's changing the dynamics of folks. It's not necessarily reducing the labor market yet. I think that's going to come into play, though, in the next 18 months. I think we'll see what the real ramifications of that are going to be within 18 months, though.
That's a perfect segue from what you were saying earlier, because you said you normally, to develop a new program, it takes about 2 years. And you said you did it in 4, and you did it with a fraction number of the people. The next question was from Deb: is there a meaningful economic barrier for small actors to get into this space, especially since you said you can do so much more with less people now?
Yeah, so I get questions about that all the time. There is a large barrier to entry when it comes to building the model. So don't try, if you're a 1 or a 2 person company, don't try to go build your own large language model. It's millions of dollars. I did it when I was at Empower at my last company. It took us, 18 months and almost $7 million to build one. They are expensive. The computers, that's just to run the models. The computers themselves, I mean, you're talking about thousands and thousands of GPUs. And you're also talking about a lot of environmental complexities that go into that. Heat that's generated, the power, the water, all that stuff. So there are some nuances with that. Don't try to build your own. Use something that's out there. You can tailor it. You can train it a little bit on some of the data specifically that you want. If you want it to do certain types of cookbooks, for example, I'm just saying, train it on those specific types of cookbooks, and then you go have it write a new cookbook for you that's based on some of those other ones. That's the space that you want to get on. You want to use these models and you want to apply the models. You don't want to develop the models. Extraordinarily expensive.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Deb asks, how do we know that the tool is an AI linked form? She says that no social media has meaningful opt-out options.
Yeah. Deb, I have had I've had that conversation with so many people, and that's why I always say with my Facebook example, they are using your data. Whether or not you can opt out, that is a challenge. I don't know if that will ever be quite honestly solved until people stop using that specific platform. And I'm not saying Facebook's the only one, right? Everybody's doing it. And so the challenge then becomes, well, what kind of information do I want to put out there? If I put my cyber my certified ethical hacker hat on, there's so much data out there that I've shown this to some other government agencies. I can troll with my bots, social media platforms, pull information down that people think is innocuous, and I can go out and I can open new credit cards. I can get into their bank accounts. I can do a whole bunch of things that with just basic data that they're putting out there. And that's also using large language models to do those kind of things. And so just be careful what you put out there. That's all I can say. We're not going to be able to opt out unless the platform is a brand new one that realizes that's a problem. These guys are so data hungry, they don't see that as a problem yet. And people are still flocking to them. So why would they? So just be careful.
Thank you, thank you. Next question from Suyon. How can people stay up to date with AI? And if I don't want a fridge to tell me what to drink or a rice cooker that micromanages me?
Yes, it's hard. I'll tell you, it's even hard for me. I've got bots that are out there trolling the internet on any new large language model that comes out, and I get a data feed at midnight every night. It generates a report for me, and it gives me a whole list of different new technologies, things that it's seen. I've had my identity stolen 6 times from foreign governments, and so I want to see if anything shows up on the dark web, those kind of things. And even with all that, I miss stuff. It misses stuff. It's hard to be able to do that and understand it. And so what I encourage folks to do, don't believe the hype. If Elon Musk says one thing, then look for somebody else to say the complete opposite. Try to find something in the middle. Use some of the basic ones. The 4 that I showed you guys, they're really good. And those are the 4 basic ones that I would say if you had to ask it certain questions, those are the ones that you'd want to focus on. But then also ask these large language models, hey, you know what? I want to use AI to do this or something else. How can I do it? It'll help you. It'll help you. And it'll even help you keep up to date on AI itself, because each one of these models have different training periods, which is why I like using them as well. So I can check what the other responses are at the same time, and then I can go out and do my own research around that. So focus a little bit. You can't boil the ocean because you're just not capable of doing it. Nobody is. No one person is able to do that. So don't beat yourself up too much, but find a couple that are good that you like and use those.
We have one more question from Marcia. And well, actually, another one. It says, I foresee many lawsuits such as AI used in various forums, e.g. in job recruitment. Can it be relied upon to comply with EEO regulations, etc.? Nope. Short answer.
No, not yet. The European Union is ahead of us significantly from a regulation perspective. If you guys may have seen, about 6 months ago, where Italy banned the use of ChatGPT because it wasn't adhering to GDPR. It was allowing kids that were under 12 to put personal information in there, and it wasn't automatically catching that. France then, of course, did the same sort of thing. You're exactly right on the lawsuit piece. They're coming. They've started a little bit. The regulation piece is still behind. That one is going to be, again, 18 to 24 months. I think we're going to see some things that start to really come out of that, because now that Copilot, for instance, is on the Microsoft platform, I want reassurances that anything that I write in a paper is not going to show up somewhere else. And so there are some nuances and some situations that are not to a lot of folks liking that are going to have to be regulated. That's the only way that they're going to do it. So there's more to come on that.
Thank you. And Rakeen asks, did AI have detectable labor market effects in aggregate or at the occupation or industry level before generative AI began to become widespread? Is most of the impact due to Gen AI?
No, actually, this has really been going on for about 10 years. When you look at what was called RPA, robotic process automation, that really started with the auditing firms. It started with the service desk, and it kind of expanded out from there. Those industries saw huge reductions in staff. What did not get hit were like the software developers or things that I would say were at a higher level. So if you had a technical problem that you had to go to the service desk on, If it can't be automated, then it's got to go to a different level, goes to somebody else that would fix that. Those level 2, level 3 type skill sets were not touched. Now with generative AI, it's starting to move that bar significantly higher, and so it is starting to filter through some of those other areas that are what we would classify traditionally as maybe not an expert level, but definitely a higher skill level. And so there are perturbations that are taking place where those labor markets are being significantly affected. However, I will tell you on the backside of that, though, is that some of these folks, and why they bring me in, have released these things too fast. They don't understand what they can do. They've cut staff to the point that they had such belief in these AI models that they never thought, what happens when it screws up? And it does screw up, and you got to be able to deal with it. And if you don't have the people on staff to be able to deal with it, if you don't have the folks that understand how to do it, that's a big problem. And so there's a little bit of a pendulum shift starting where folks are starting to slow down a little bit. Let's not release it into our new software or into our service desk quite as fast as we thought, because now we realize we have to have a human to filter some of these things and look at it a little bit closer before we want to release it into the wild. So there are some ramifications with some of those companies. I'll tell you, the hour after ChatGPT released their API, that means that anybody in the wild could go out and they could pull that into their software, and then they could build it on top of that. There were 936 companies that were advertising they already had it built into their products. That's scary, because I can tell you maybe 3, maybe 4 of those companies actually knew what it could do and what it couldn't do and what it should never do. Just let that kind of sink in. That's scary. It's really scary. And so, but a lot of those companies have had to pull back because they were tremendous failures in doing some of those things. And so again, talking about that shift in the market, it's going to be folks that understand how to use these tools, understand what they can do, what they can't do, that are going to replace the folks that don't know how to use them or are unwilling to use them. Because honestly, it's not, I could offer a course, and at the end of that day course, you would think, I can use this, I can understand it. Now you got to play with it. That's what's going to drive. It's going to be a big driver in the job market. I've already seen resumes that are saying, yep, I know how to use 5 different large language models and interact with them. And then I ask them follow-up questions, and they're usually pretty good when they say that. That's already starting to show up on resumes. So it's very important.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. Last question, and then afterwards, we'd like to see if people want to know more about you, or information about AI in general. If you have any suggestions, or if you'd like to put your information. I know you said you'd be willing to share the slide presentation that you showed us. The last question is from Marcia. How fast does AI tech improve? For example, will it be similar to computing power? Get exponentially better?
So it does not follow Moore's law. Moore's law is, how it was always the amount of processing power that you could have, and you would, you see that exponential scale that takes place. We don't have enough data yet to really generate a graph, because you've got, from, I would say, pre-2018 and what was taking place pre-2018 to 2018 and to now. If you look at the statistics on how these large language models have performed on just standardized tests, it's a 60% improvement for ChatGPT between version 3.5 and 4.0. And they expect something similar between 4.0 and 5.0. It's all going to be fundamentally based on how much more data that they can put into these models and train them. I mean, I'm seeing new models that are being released that are huge improvements over where they started in weeks. That's unheard of from a technology perspective, even from a software perspective, for goodness sakes. And so I can't quantify it other than to say it's fast and we can't keep up with it. I mean, you've gotta be nimble, very nimble on your software, very nimble on how you're using it, willing to throw something away and start over from scratch if you have to, because honestly, it won't take you very long to recreate it in some cases. So it's tremendously fast.
All right. Well, Dr. Badeau, thank you so much. This was absolutely fascinating. I really appreciate you coming here to join us and educate us. If people want to know more about you or AI in general, if they have any questions, do you have anything that they could use?
Yeah, I mean, if folks want to go out to, I've got a couple of different websites that are out there. There's some information on those. More, take a look at those, and again, the you know, I love doing these things because the feedback that I get after is really great when people have tried it and they've said, "Hey, you know what? I was able to do this with my business that I was scared to do before because I just didn't understand it. Now I understand it because ChatGPT helped me get through the process, and now I can do this." That's the stuff that I really enjoy, and that's why I tell everybody, try it, play with it. If you have a question, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help. And send me an email, whatever. I'll show you all the stuff that if I've got anything relevant, if I want to try it and see if I can get something to work, I'm more than happy to provide that kind of stuff free. And I'm not going to charge you anybody for that kind of stuff because I want people to learn. I want people to embrace it. I want them to really see that it can be a life changer for you, for a business that you want to start, one that you already have. So don't be strangers when it comes to that kind of thing.
Excellent. And would you like me to paste in your website, the alanbadeau.com, or a
Sure.
different site?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll put that in the chat for anybody who might want it. And excellent. Well, thank you so much for everybody who joined us today and everybody who stayed around. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something new, and we look forward to having you in the next program. And
All right,
Dr. Badeau, if you ever want to do this again or have any updates, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to host you anytime.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right,
Been
you
great.
take care. All right, bye-bye.